Isaac, it's March, for goodness sakes, which means there's some madness in the air, but we're also going to dig into the Word as we do every week. So welcome. I've got my Midway Baptist cup. I'm celebrating my first anniversary as pastor, and I'm celebrating the 9th anniversary of receiving this cup because I walked into that church 9 years ago this week. So how are you
I
today?
saw you post on Facebook about the 9-year anniversary of you walking into that church and that they gave you um, coffee cup. And I was like, I think I know what coffee cup is showing up this week on Woods in the Word getting coffee. You'll be shocked to see I'm sitting here in my good old faithful black mug,
Old standard.
not reminding me of snow because I get that reminder in every
Oh,
window that I look out of.
oh golly. Good grief. Well, hey, today, Jonah has just experienced the greatest miracle in the Old Testament. We talked about it last week. All the Ninevites hearing his 8-word message of judgment and repenting in humility and sackcloth and ashes with fasting, and God has delivered them. And today we find out Jonah's response to that, which we've alluded to before, but we're going to delve right into it here in chapter 4. And it leads us to the question, Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about this? It's a tough question, but we're going to let God ask him the question. So let me just read the first part of this. Jonah chapter 4, verse 1. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. The Hebrew says that he thought this was evil. He considered this really bad. This is, as far as he's concerned, this is God doing evil, that he did not judge the Ninevites. This was evil. That's what it means when it says it displeased Jonah exceedingly. And he was angry, red hot, as mad as you could get about anything, angry. And he prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish. For I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster." He knew that before he ended up in the drink himself, and he experienced it all over again in a fresh new way. Therefore, verse 3, now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. That's his analysis of the situation. And so God says, Jonah, do you do well to be angry? What do we do with this guy?
God is so gentle through this space.
Yes.
And we'll talk about a little later how I think I have always read the book of Jonah and focused on Jonah. I think God's the star of this book.
Yeah.
But just this response here, and I think it's so easy for us to be like, Jonah, what? Like you almost died. You got ate by a freaking fish for 3 days. God saves you from that. You go to Nineveh, you do your message, and then God saves them, which is apparently what you tell us you were expecting. But like, if that's what you were expecting, and then finally God got in your head and you agreed to go, then why did your expectations change? And then just the power of hate.
Wow.
Is what comes across here.
Yes.
Like that. I mean, and we didn't spend a lot of time on this, and we don't have to, but like Nineveh, Jonah's
they're bad people.
They're bad people, but they're like bad people specifically against Jonah and his people.
Yes. And who knows what Jonah had actually experienced.
Yeah, there's a lot of different. I mean, the Jewish people have run up against a lot of different enemies throughout their time. And so think about any of them that you're aware of. And it's like Jonah going to them and then them being saved. And so like it's a lot. And so like as America, I don't know that we've had enemies like this.
Well, this would be like Osama bin Laden getting saved.
Similar.
And becoming an evangelist. His whole
but
group.
I think Nineveh was even a bigger deal to Jonah and his people than even Osama bin Laden was to us. But yeah, it's like going there and then saving those people. And like, how do you feel about that? And it's very easy for us as Christians to know how we are supposed to feel about that. Jonah knew how he was supposed to feel about that. Like, what's the right answer, the Sunday school answer? And that's what I think we all sit here and apply Sunday school answers to Jonah and think, Jonah, why would you do that? And I think a lot of us would respond in a very similar way when we saw God actually execute the salvation of our enemies.
Right. And on the one hand, it's every evangelist's dream, okay? To go send me to the hardest place. Let me just speak a clear gospel message and everybody gets saved. That's kind of what we dream about. Every evangelist except Jonah, because he's like, no, this is wrong. This is evil. Don't do it. Don't save them.
When you think he got a little excited, because again, the message was not Jesus saves, Jesus loves you.
The message was you got 40 days and I'm coming for you.
You're done. God's going to kill you. And then I think he delivers it. And then he gets to go sit up on his perch. And you think part of him was like, maybe I had God wrong. Like, maybe I'm about to see a fireworks show and this will be great. And I think he allowed himself to get kind of excited to what he was looking forward to.
Right.
And then when God saved him, it was like this letdown to him. But, we don't have to look at it at the national scale. Like, we tried to apply it Jewish nation to America, but really it's like we have quote unquote enemies, people that we don't dislike, people that we're in competition with, people that we just don't get along with.
Right.
When we look even within our borders, like folks that are anti-God, anti-Jesus, anti a lot of things that we stand for, and we can set them on these enemy pedestals. And what does it look like for God to move in them, and would we be on board with that?
Well, and what do our prayers for them sound like when we do pray for them? Are we praying for their salvation, or are we praying for lightning bolts and ashes and Lord, take care of them?
Yep.
How many of those Lord, take care of them prayers have we prayed when we didn't mean, oh Lord, graciously save them?
Yeah, I would love to see them in my church next week.
No.
So I think we give Jonah a hard time, and it's an earned hard time when we read through this. But I think the challenge to us is to not just see what should Jonah have done, or why did he respond this way, but how do we make sure that we don't respond in the same way that Jonah does in these scenarios?
And that's good. And, it's so interesting. Again, Jonah's not complaining about the Ninevites. You would expect him to give us a list here in verse 2 of all the bad things they'd done. But instead, his issue is with God. God, not your grace for my enemies. God, not your mercy. God, not your patience. Just finish them off. I'm up here watching. Just zap them right now. Not your steadfast love, because they don't deserve it. Not relenting from this disaster. No, Lord, you said 40 days and you're going to destroy them. Do it. Don't wait for 40 days either. Do it now. And then I'd rather die than see you save my enemies.
You can see Jonah's a drama queen here. Like,
he is a drama queen. Yes.
Come on, like the way he reacts early on, right? And to go run and all this, and then now this episode is like, kill me now. It's like, you just prayed for God to save you. Why? Like,
2 chapters ago, now it's asking for rescue now.
Yeah, like but that's human. That's human nature.
It's very human.
We're all very dramatic when it comes to our own desires and what we think this world should look like.
Well, and it's so amazing. Again, 2 chapters ago, friends, in case you missed it, in chapter 2, Jonah experiences the grace of God. He experienced the mercy of God. God has been very patient with Jonah. He has demonstrated and shown Jonah his steadfast love. He relented from disaster when he sent a fish to scoop Jonah off the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Jonah thanked God and declared salvation is from the Lord. I'm gonna do the thing he told me to do. Here I go to Nineveh. And then he goes, he delivers the message. And even just walking through Nineveh with the Assyrians around him, and just had to intensify his hatred and evil, and reminding him of who they were and everything they'd done. And God saves them, and it's just wrong. Why did you do that, God?
But at our core, that's always our issue. We throw a lot of smoke in different directions to distract like what we're upset about. But at our core, when we're upset, we're always upset with God.
Yes.
It's how we don't think God handled something correctly. Whether someone got something that we didn't think they should get, or someone didn't get something that we thought they should get. It doesn't have to be ourselves, but a lot of times it's us. We think we deserve better, and that our enemies are those people that got something better than us, or it's not fair. Life's not fair. So much of that. But at the end of the day, it's like we've what our issue is really with God and how we think he should be running things.
Right. Yeah. And it's just sad. And so Jonah is the reluctant prophet. And now he's, because he didn't want to go to Nineveh, but he finally got there. And now he's the pathetic prophet. I
saw you put that in the notes.
Yeah.
He's a pathetic prophet. I was like, I can't wait till he drops that on the congregation.
But it gets worse. It gets worse. I mean, as bad as this sounds, then verse 5, he goes out of the city to sit to the east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade till
he thought he was going to see a show.
Yeah.
He set up to see a show. Got popcorn.
Right. Maybe this is, we're going to have a new Dead Sea right here in Nineveh. God's going to burn them up. Nothing but salt. And the Lord even appointed a plant and made it come up over Jonah so that he would have even more shade over his head to save him from his discomfort. So Jonah was
still taking care of him.
He's still taking care of him. Yes. I talk about being patient. So Jonah was exceedingly glad because of the plant. But when dawn came up the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint. And he asked that he might die and said, "It is better for me to die than to live." Here he is again. Just kill me. But God said to Jonah, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant? Now you're worried about this shade tree that I put up over you." And he said, "Yes, I do well to be angry enough to die." That's the point here. Why don't you kill me?
And the Lord reminds me of Jonah's response here. Reminds me of like your kids. Yes. Like I remember one time Samuel was probably 3, and we were getting ready to go to Disney World, obviously. And it was something we were trying to get him bathed the night before leaving.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to get in the bathtub. And we were like, I said, like, if you don't get in this bath, like, we can't go to Disney World. So are you really going to sacrifice Disney World if you don't take a bath? And he said, yes, that's my choice. It's like, that's the reminds me of Jonah. Like, what?
Yes, we all, you're so right. We all have Jonah at our core.
Yeah.
And we love to rail on him because he's taking the heat for us. We're hoping nobody will notice our real thoughts because they're focused on how pathetic Jonah is.
Right.
But here we are. And so God's like, let me get this straight. You pity the plant for which you did not labor. You didn't make it grow. It came into being one day and was gone the next. Should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who don't know their right hand from their left, and also much livestock? Shouldn't I care about them? Jonah, you care about this plant. Don't you think I care at least as much about these people as you do about this plant?
And then the book's over.
Yeah, well, you know why I think I think it ends right there, because if Jonah says one more word, he's toast. That firework that he thought was going to be, I think, is headed right for him in his little booth. Or the next, if he says anything, the next sound he hears is splash, because God has picked him up and thrown him back into the Mediterranean Sea.
I I think it ends there though. I think it's great. Just God is so creative. And he's good. He's good at what he does, including
Yes.
writing books. Um,
Yes.
because this sits here and then it allows us to choose our own adventure, kind of. Remember those books
Yeah,
when I was
exactly.
growing up?
Write your own
You
ending. Yeah.
choose your own adventure. So you get to the end of a chapter and then it would have two options and you could choose like
Go to
which door you
chapter
went through or
7 if you
whatever. And
think
then
that, or go to
you
chapter 5.
move to this page or you move to that page. It's like this is kind of a choose your own adventure where we get to finish when we finish reading Jonah, say, how would I respond to that? Like put ourselves in Jonah's shoes and just kind of see how that plays out. Or maybe how would Jonah respond and see how it plays out? Does he get tossed in the lake, or does he respond positively and say, you know what, God,
You're right.
you're right. My
Yeah.
bad. And then go and he lives with Nineveh and makes a family there, and he marries a Ninevite, and they have great Jewish Nineveh kids. I don't know, like
Right. No, we
it's
don't
like
know.
we don't know, but this is but it's the application for us, and so it's like I'd always looked at this and kind of received it as negative, like that it just ended, and man, Jonah never got it. We never got to see Jonah get it, and they didn't get it.
Right.
Um, it'd be like if the story of Samson ended before his final scene,
Yes.
where you
Right.
you're left with them not
Where's
getting it.
Jonah
We don't
chapter
have
5?
proof.
I want to read
We
chapter.
don't have proof that Jonah got it, but I think it leaves us the last verse of this book is God explaining
It's the last.
his love for people. And so,
Mm.
one, God always has the last word, is a good takeaway.
Right. Yeah.
But this interaction kind of reminds me of Job, of God's interaction with Job. It's a very similar point that God's making of, I'm God, you are not,
You are not.
but these are my people. And it's Joseph represents ourselves in this, and then God represents himself in this. But think about, as we walk through just 4 books here, think about the people God saved. So God saved, first of all, the unknown people who had no idea of him, the sailors. They
Right.
had no idea he even existed. They saw his might and were convinced of him being real, and they believed him.
Right.
And he saved them.
Yeah.
Jonah, then God saved from drowning.
Yes.
And then he also saved Jonah got a second chance to go participate in God's will.
Do what
Then Jonah goes to Nineveh and God saves Nineveh. So he saved people that never heard of him. He saved Joseph kind of represents us Christians in the church. He saves the Christians when we screw up. Right. He saves us. We screw up just as much as the sinners. And then that salvation is bookended by him saving 2 groups of people. The sailors kind of came to it on their own, and then the Ninevites were specifically given a chance. Yes. But all 3 of those people, the sailors on the boat in chapter 1, Jonah in chapter 2, and then the Ninevites in chapter 3, God saves them because, and this is key, they chose to obey him. They believed him, like we talked about last week, right? And so wherever we are in our realm, whoever we're dealing with, God will save them. God will save us. God will save you when you choose to obey him and believe him.
That's beautiful. And the story of Jonah this week, I was reminded of the story Jesus told in chapter 20 of Matthew about the laborers in the vineyard. When the vineyard owner went out early in the morning and he hired some guys, told them he'd pay them a day's wage and sent them out to work. And then he goes back into town several different times, including an hour before quitting time, and hires more people and sends them to the field and tells them, I'll settle with you when we're done. And so when the day is over and he tells the foreman to bring the guys in to pay them, he brings in the last guys first, the guys who only worked an hour, and he paid them a full day's wage, and which was incredibly generous of him. But the guys who had committed to work 12 hours for a full day's wage, they're thinking, oh, we're going to get more. But instead, they got exactly the same wage that they were promised.
Life's not fair.
And that's what they get all Jonah about it and upset about it. But God says, and the vineyard owner obviously represents God there, and he says, did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I gave to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? And just the way Jesus asked that question, where is the way God is asking Jonah. Jonah, do you begrudge my generosity? Do you have a problem with the fact that I'm saving these people who don't deserve it? Guess what? Nobody else does either. And so the parable that Jesus tells, it's a great parable to let people know it's never too late. Even the 11th hour, it's never too late to receive the grace of God and experience his blessings and the kingdom that he has for us. As long as you have breath, you can receive his mercy and his generosity. But also he saves who he wants to. He gets to choose that. He's God. We're not. We got to be okay with that.
Absolutely. And then, so I was actually spent some time in my study Bible. I got a study Bible for Christmas.
Cool. Awesome.
Figuring out how to
study the Bible, so you should have a study
Bible. So I spent some time wrapping up Jonah in it today. And I love this note on Jonah chapter 4, verse 11. So that's God's final words, right?
Last word. Yeah.
And I'd never looked at the book of Jonah this way that I'm about to read before. And it's just this is the encouraging finish to Jonah that without this, I don't know that I would have got to, because I always leave Jonah hanging there in misery. Right. And it feels incomplete. But then I love this break. So this is what this says. The book of Jonah provides fascinating insights into our own sinful human nature.
Right.
Jonah was stubborn, angry, and resentful, and we may identify strongly with his shortcomings. I think we do often. As God treated Jonah, he will also treat us. He listens, explains himself to us, gives us second chances, which we talked about last week, right, and reveals his heart to us. I never looked at those verses 10, 11 of God revealing his heart to Jonah. Right? And he does that for us. We can feel safe telling God our true feelings about people who are difficult to love in our families, ministries, or workplaces. And we can trust him to take care of us as he did Jonah. Wow. I had never looked at those last two verses, I always looked at it as God kind of reprimanding Jonah. And he was in a way, but that the takeaway could be that we should feel safe going to God, because actually when you go back and read it, he doesn't reprimand him. God is telling Jonah, this is my heart for these people. He's inviting him to join him in his heart for people. Yeah. It doesn't tell us that he threw him in the sea. It doesn't tell us that the lightning hit him. No, because as far as he's explaining his heart to people, this isn't God's invitation to Jonah to join God in his pursuit of mankind, to join God in his heart for people. And I just had never looked at it that way, that Jonah was allowed to express his concerns about this, that God welcomes, that doesn't scare God. No, we might not agree with it. Yeah. It doesn't scare him, but he invites us to share that with him.
Right.
Like if Jonah was feeling this way, and
He's
you
honest
better
with God.
to be honest with God and tell him that, like, God, listen, like I don't get this. And
Right.
I don't want this. I don't want this. What we don't get is, like we talked about Psalms, where Jonah comes back and says, "But I remember you and I come back." We saw that in
Right.
chapter 3. So we know Jonah has that in him.
Right.
But just, I love that finishing, because like, as we started this one, I was like, how are we did 4 weeks on Jonah, and we're gonna end on just, well, he's in a bad mood.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Well,
God did good and he's in a bad mood, so just don't be in a bad mood. But this was such an encouraging takeaway for me that I wanted to make sure that we kind of wrapped up with that that
well,
no matter how you're feeling, you share it with God, and God will engage with you. Like, there's an intimacy there that I think when we neglect to share ourselves,
mhm.
we neglect then to engage in God in that intimate way. And it's
Right.
just a different level of a relationship that I trust that Jonah, if there was a Jonah chapter 5, that he would have at least have experienced it and realized that.
Right. And it's and you're so right. God gets the last word. He always does. But it's this intimate conversation. I mean, Jonah has a conversation with God that's pretty deep and personal here. We would all like to experience that, but we got to be honest with God in order to do it. You're exactly right.
And
And
we don't always make room for that honesty in the American church. Like,
no,
there's a lot of this, we've got to put on this facade that we're all doing things right all
right.
the time. And you should try to do things right. Like, that should be the goal. Like, you
But when we
prefer to be
don't,
Jonah
what's our
chapter 3.
option? Yeah.
But when you don't, and you're struggling with things, to have the freedom to express it. And then I think the challenging part is, like, God can handle it, but like, can we handle that? Like, if we have a Jonah in our life, if we have someone who's feeling the way Jonah is about something, are we a safe space for them to express those concerns to?
Right.
Or do we immediately, I mean, you want to encourage people to work through that, but do we immediately say, like Job's friends did, like, you're way off
Right.
base? And
Yeah.
can we
You're
have God's
absolutely
heart in that too?
well, right. And we'll leave it here as God ends it. He expresses his heart of love for these people, and he leaves that invitation open, because what he's really saying is, Jonah, I want you to love these people the way I do.
Yeah.
And the way that I've loved you. And this is who I am. I'm not apologizing for it. This is who I am. I'm inviting you to get on board with it. And it's the invitation he gives us all as the book of Jonah ends, as we read it, because it's in the Bible for us to read and ponder this last question. Should I not take pity on these people? Because this is who I am. I care for people. I love people. I'm not willing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. That's the message of the Bible.
Amen. Message of Jonah.
It's the message of Jonah. We'll leave it there, friends. Next week, we're going to get in a boat with Jesus and see what happens. So we've been
More boats.
It's more boats. It's a boat kind of a year. But what happens when you're in the boat with Jesus? So we'll look at that next time. But consider the message of Jonah. Consider his anger, his honesty with God, and how God responds to everybody in the story. Yeah. So well done. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and for us wrestling and grappling together with the story of Jonah. It's been good.
Been fun. See you next week.
See you next time.